Hey everyone, it is Gills with the Power Talk. As Kansas State picks up its first commitment out of the transfer portal on Monday, Abdi Bashir out of Monmouth is a Wildcat. Jerome Tang and his staff, after missing out on a couple of players, have gotten their first win out of the portal. Brendan Hausen left on Monday. Buddy Rich left last week. K-State finally is able to add to its roster, as we'll break down the good and also maybe the bad here later on with his game. Before I tell you to subscribe here to GoPowercat.com, leave a like, leave a comment, hit that subscribe button. All that good stuff really feeds that algorithm, helps us grow and reach more K-Staters. But when you're looking at Bashir, it's a player that scored 20 points a game last year. So obviously it goes without saying that he can score the basketball. You know, that needs no endorsement from me. And you look at some of the games against notable, power competition, 38 points against Rutgers, 20 against Michigan State, 15 against Auburn. I know there was a respectable game against, Wichita State as well. So, the translation to the Big 12 maybe isn't going to be as steep or as challenging as it might be for some other guys out of the portal. That's encouraging. That's something that you like to see here for the nation's number one three-point shooter from last year. In terms of makes per game at 3.8, Bashir was the best in NCAA Division I. So goes without saying, man, this guy can score. He can put the ball through the net. I believe he was at about 38% from three-point range as well. So that's pretty good. If he was on Kansas State's team this past season, he'd be right up there with Brendan Hausen as the best player in terms of three-point percentage. I think it was Buddy Rich and Taj Manning were up above that, up in the 50s. But you look at the real numbers, who's shooting those three-pointers, right? This player, K-State had him on the team last year, would probably be the right-hand man with Doug McDaniel. And assuming McDaniel, does stay in Manhattan, I think that's also something that's encouraging, is the thought of McDaniel and Bashir playing together, right? This is going to be a guard duo. I think that Bashir is going to come in, obviously, and compete for starting minutes, likely at that 2 spot. And this will be a guard duo that can really complement each other, right? Go down, obviously maybe go downhill like Doug McDaniel can do and create your own points with layups and floaters, but just kind of, I don't want to say chucking up threes, but making your own shots, right? Little acrobatic plays here and there. And that kind of is a nice segue into maybe the bad is, some people are critical of the system, the offense for this team. And, that's neither here nor there. I'm not going to get into that right now, but for this offense, for this system, a guy like Bashir is perfect. Just go out and hoop. Maybe not a whole lot of offensive sets, plays. That's going to fit right into his wheelhouse. Now, again, maybe that's not what you want, but that is what the offense is in Manhattan. Bashir is a good candidate for that. And when you pair him with Doug McDaniel, you're going to see a lot of points being scored, right? And facilitating, that's obviously going to be something that Bashir does have to work on, though. A negative assist to turnover ratio last season at Monmouth, that is absolutely not going to cut it here in the Big 12. Point blank, or plain and simple, that has to be better at Kansas State. And after kind of a breakout year, the scoring was absolutely there for Bashir, but facilitating was not there. The turnovers were there, right? You can blame him being on a bad team all you want, maybe for the lack of assists, but the turnovers, right? If you have more turnovers than assists, that's not great. That has to get cleaned up here in this offseason as K-State prepares for 2025-26. And I wouldn't call it a red flag, but certainly something that you have to mention when you're talking about a player that comes in. I know there's a lot of buzz here for Bashir coming in out of the portal. It is the first guy, I get it, but you're looking at one of the worst defensive players, according to Evan Mia. The defensive ratings, you can check it out up online. Those are free to access. He does rank as one of the worst defensive players in all of college basketball. So offensively, literally number one in terms of three-point makes per game, right? He led the NCAA in three-pointers all year. But that defense definitely needs to also have a step up. Talking to a couple people, maybe familiar with Bashir as well, defense was brought up. You're going to have to see better defense here in the Big 12, right? Taking care of the basketball, going to need to be better in that regard as well. But the number one thing that I'm going to be honest, I don't love about this pickup is Monmouth was 13-20 last season. You've got to get winners on your team. And you look at by fall, Max Jones, CJ Jones, Doug McDaniel, all four of those guys came from sub 500 teams last offseason. Did they bring some stuff to the table? Absolutely. But you need to bring in guys that know how to win, okay? If you bring in Bashir here and then you go in and add a bunch of guys that made the NCAA tournament or have been a part of winning teams, I'm not going to be too concerned. But if you keep adding guys from maybe these lower, conferences that have not been to the NCAA tournament or have had losing seasons, I'm not sure how much that's going to really move the needle this next season, right? Now, with the way you want to build your roster, right? Jerome Tang's new way, maybe in the years to come, you can start to see the fruits of that. But I'd caution anybody, just in terms of this next season, assuming that you can kind of keep that core for, not this next year, but the year after that, then you can start to see maybe some of that winning coming together. But if you're expecting a bunch of players on sub 500 teams to come in and magically, turn the tide, that's not going to be it. Your guys that are returning are going to have to step up. And that's part of maybe this, Houston. I'm recording this as Houston's playing. I don't know if they're going to win this game or lose against Florida, but that's the way that, Jerome Tang wants to do it with the Houston model, right? Go out, get guys, keep them in your program, get old, stay old, experience, maturity, develop your players, right? That's what you're going to have to get out of a guy like Bashir, because he can put the ball through the net. But when you're the dude on a losing team, that shows that you have work to do. There's work to be done. I mentioned the defense. I mentioned the assist to turnover ratio, negative. There is going to be some work here. So I know there's a lot of hype, on social media. People are excited about this, and don't get me wrong. I'm excited as well for Bashir and what he can do here in the Little Apple in a purple jersey. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Anybody coming in from the portal is going to have maybe some tweaks, some weaknesses that need to be worked out. And that, of course, relies on the staff. It's incumbent that they kind of work on some of those issues here in the off season. And, it's only April, but, it's going to be October, November before you know it, and the season's going to be starting. And that's kind of the challenge of this day and age in college basketball. You don't have as much time to maybe develop the players that you'd like, but only 2 years under his belt. Bashir does have 2 years left here. So if you can get him for 1 year, good. If you can get him for 2 years, that's great. K-State's going to have to do its best to keep a guy like Bashir on its roster for not only this next year, but for the years to come as well. Keep an eye out on GoPowercat on Tuesday-ish, maybe Wednesday morning for a film study. We'll break down his game, and it'll be most good, what you should like out of Bashir's game. But other than that, Kansas State finally gets its first edition out of the transfer portal.